Hello everyone, welcome to Caber's Take Light. Today we will be learning about the element sulfur on the periodic table. So let's just start off with just basic things about sulfur, what you'd find on the periodic table about sulfur. So sulfur's atomic number is 16. That means that it's the 16th element on the periodic table if you're looking from left to right like you normally would when you read. Therefore, that means that if you count 16 different boxes, which are the elements, from left to right, you will find that the 16th is sulfur, which is what we'll be talking about today. The periodic table is pretty easy to understand, even if you know nothing about any element, because it's just, like you can see, like it gives you diagrams to show what's what and where you find what and whatever. It's pretty easy. Anyway, sulfur's symbol is a big giant S for sulfur, which it makes sense, but there are also other elements like lead that makes no sense whatsoever. The symbol is Pb, even though lead is not edible and it's not peanut butter. So that makes no sense, but at least sulfur is easy because sulfur starts with an S and the symbol is an S, so that makes sense. The atomic mass for sulfur is 32, which you can see at the bottom of the little squares, the little sulfur element square. So the atomic structure of sulfur looks a little like this, okay? 16 protons because every element has the same number of protons as the atomic number, which means sulfur has 16 protons. It also has 16 neutrons, and to calculate the number of neutrons you have in an element, just simply take the atomic mass of the element, which is 32 in our case, and subtract the atomic number, which is 16 in our case. Therefore, you're left with 16 neutrons. It's easy. So sulfur has the same number of neutrons and protons and electrons. Oh yeah, electrons. To find out how many electrons there are, well, it's the same number as protons because protons are positive, electrons are negative, and they have to even out because that's just how symmetry works. So sulfur has 16 electrons orbiting a nucleus, which the nucleus is that big round thing in the middle, which has the protons and the neutrons inside of it. In the first shell, which is the circle on which like the electrons orbit the nucleus. In the first shell, we put 2 electrons in because, or we don't put them in. God puts them in, but we can only put 2 in because that's the maximum amount we can put in the first shell. In the second shell and third shell, we can put a maximum of 8 electrons in, and that means that after we put the 2 electrons in the first shell, we have 14 left. That means we want to use all 8 seats, or all 8 spots in the second shell, which means that we only have 6 protons left, which means we don't have to use the full 8 in the third shell. We only need to use 6. So therefore, we only need 3 shells to host all the electrons needed for the element of sulfur. And that is the Bohr-Rutherford's diagram of. So those are the easy parts that you need to learn. The most important parts, I guess, they need to learn about sulfur. So now let's move on to the more complicated parts. So let's continue with a little bit of history and background information on the element of sulfur. Sulfur has been known about for thousands of years, dating back all the way to 500 BC. That's back in the day when Ezekiel eats the scroll that tastes like honey. Back in the day when Daniel survived the lion's den. That was a long time ago. When I read the Bible, at least, I'm like, well, that was a long time ago. And then I learned that sulfur was discovered back then. And I'm like, wow, they are actually a little bit more smarter than I thought they were back then. And sulfur is actually mentioned in the Bible as well. Sulfur is mentioned in Genesis, which was actually written in about 1400 BC So I'm not sure why we have it written down that it was discovered 500 BC if sulfur was mentioned 1400 BC, which is a lot more in history than 500 BC. Sulfur used to be called brimstone, which in Hebrew is goprith, which appears 7 times in the Old Testament. So it appears 7 times in the original manuscript of the Bible, which means that sulfur must have been discovered a long time ago, long before 500 BC, 1400 BC, yeah, because it was used as a metaphor, no, a simile, no, maybe both. We don't really know how sulfur was discovered back then. We don't know whether it was like, oh, look at this pretty rock, or crystal, looks pretty cool, look at that, oh, wow. I'm gonna call this rhinestone, also known as sulfur. I don't think that's how it happened, but I don't know. We don't know, nobody knows. So that's what I'm gonna say. However, sulfur was not discovered as a pure element until 1777, forgive me when I pronounce this name, but when Antoine Lavoisier, who is French, he's from France, when he discovered that sulfur is not just a compound, it is actually a pure element. So you might ask, where can we find sulfur exactly? Sulfur is mainly found near hot springs and near volcanic regions in most part of the world, especially around the Ring of Fire. We also know that sulfur is created within the deep depths of massive stars in the universe. Do you know that sulfur is actually the 10th most common element in the entire universe? It is true. If you look it up, you'll see that I'm right. As well as with all of the stuff that I'm saying in this video, because it's all from research. Now it's time for some statistics about the element sulfur, its physical characteristics and properties. So, to begin, sulfur is a solid at room temperature. It's a transparent yellow crystal, which is pretty cool. It's a crystal. It is brittle and odorless. However, when it is mixed with other substances, it is responsible. Sulfur itself is responsible for the particular smell that certain substances, while mixed with sulfur, creates. So sulfur melts at a temperature of 150 degrees Celsius. I would also melt at that temperature, so I don't blame it. When sulfur is melted, it's really dark red in color, which is pretty cool because it goes from like a cool yellow crystal to a dark bloody red. Sulfur's boiling point is 445 degrees Fahrenheit, if I remember correctly. Actually, I think it's 444 point something, but I round to 445 degrees Fahrenheit, or Celsius, sorry. And it would also boil, if not disintegrate, at that temperature as well. Elemental sulfur is actually insoluble in water. However, it is completely soluble in carbon disulfide. The density of sulfur is about 2 grams per centimeters cubed. On Mohs scale of mineral hardness, I'm calling him Mo, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, M-O-H-S. I'm calling him Mo, Mohs. So his scale of mineral hardness, sulfur comes in at around a 2 on the scale of hardness. Also, the hotter that sulfur is heated, the more or less viscous it becomes, which means it is more liquidier. Also, just so you know, sulfur is a horrible heat conductor and electricity conductor. So don't come at me saying, Levi, it's not working as wires in my home, it's not transferring the electricity from the thing to my light bulb. I'll be like, ha, I told you that it is not conductible. And another cool characteristic of sulfur is that you know how it's crystal? The crystals change spontaneously depending, they change shape depending on the temperature around them, which is pretty cool. So let's move on now to chemical properties and characteristics. So what exactly are the chemical properties of sulfur, you may be asking, and I'll be answering that question right Now, so sulfur is a very important. Sulfur is a very important element on Earth for life. It is actually the 5th most common element on Earth. It's actually 2 whole moons volumes worth of sulfur on the Earth. So 2 whole moons, the volume of that is how much sulfur we have on the Earth. And that's a lot of crystal, yellow, cool, transparent crystals that I want to get my hands on because they're so cool looking. So you can basically make all sorts of different gases and acids and liquids and solutions with chemical reactions with sulfur. So what you do is you just take any element name and then put sulfide after it. So honestly, take any element name, put sulfide after it. This is the working rule that I have. If you're just lazy and you don't want to research what chemicals you can make with sulfur, you just take all the elements of the periodic table and put sulfide after it. Doesn't work completely, but I'm telling you, it was a pain in the butt to write all these things down because all it was an element, then sulfide after it, another element, sulfide, element, sulfide, all of these different solutions. So here are some examples. You have potassium sulfide, we have hydrogen sulfide, we have cadmium sulfide, and gallium sulfide, lead sulfide, mercury sulfide, sodium sulfide, and even more sulfides than that. So lots of different things you can make with the chemical reaction of sulfur. Sulfur can react with carbon, creating carbon disulfide, which kind of ruins the rule that I created because it says dis before the sulfide. But that's only one of the exceptions to my rule. The other one is the reaction with fluorine and sulfide, which creates sulfur hexafluoride, I think. And that is used in the electrical industry these days. I got some scissors. Also, sulfur with fluorine forms sulfur dischloride, which is very toxic and corrosive, so I wouldn't recommend sticking your hand in it or trying to eat it because you might die. So I wouldn't recommend that, but it is something. It's an element, or it's a thing that you can make when using sulfur to mix with something else. Also, there are 2 ways to make sulfur dioxide. One way is just introducing sulfur to an open flame, and then that's gonna make like a blue fire. Okay, it's gonna make a blue flame, which emits sulfur dioxide into the air, which is a gas, and it is very useful, I think. You can also make sulfur dioxide by putting sulfur in a bowl of sulfuric acid. That's one other way to do it, because it'll be a nice bubbly reaction and create some nice sulfur dioxide. And for more ideas and information about the chemical properties and characteristics of sulfur, please do, it's probably very beneficial for you to visit my website that is linked in the description below, because it might help you. I added, there's a lot on that website that I put on there, and I was like, I didn't even put all of it on there because I'm like, I've been working so long on this. I'm like, I don't want to write all that. So I'm kind of like short-formed it all, but it's all on there, and if you want to know everything, it's all on there. I put it all on there, I made it all, it's there. So right about now you might be wondering, what on earth is sulfur used for? And I'm willing to answer that question right now, because I have all the answers from the internet. Actually, that's not true, all the answers are in here. Silly. Sulfur is used in the creation of many different solutions, as I already mentioned in the chemical part that I already mentioned, sulfide. Many of these sulfides, many of these different solutions are really useful for us every single day as human beings, as I will mention very shortly. And they are also useful for scientists in their fancy-ramsy experiments. Okay, so sulfur is commonly used in fertilizers because the reaction between potassium and sulfur creates potassium sulfide, and potassium sulfide is found in some fertilizers. Sulfur also exists in many different plants, many different things, such as garlic and rotten eggs and stuff like that. Sulfur is just in general used for our well-being as well. You can find sulfur in vitamins, It's used to help our immune system with vitamins. It is also found in shampoos to fight dandruff. Okay, does that make sense? Wow, I have a headache now. And the water goes everywhere. Okay. It's used to fight dandruff, as I mentioned. It's also phenomenal at treating itchy skin from like bites from mites. Bites. It also often helps reduce common cold symptoms. So that if you're sick of, then you can take some sulfur and it'll fix all your problems. And the correct dosage can also be used to unclog your blood vessels and arteries. Because if you're clogged, if you're all clogged up in there, that could be fatal. So we use these things called sulfur, and sometimes it helps unclog your arteries, which is very nice. You see, sulfur saves lives. That's what I am all about. Sulfur. Did you know that sulfur is actually also used in building of muscles? However, these ones are not made from. It's not made from sulfur. These are real. These are real muscles. Like these are not fake. These are real. I did not use sulfur. But the sulfur can also be used to help repair tissues. And also another use for sulfur is because it's so brittle and it can be pounded into little powder, and it can be used as black gunpowder. Sulfur is flammable only when it is a powder, not when it's solid. It's not flammable. It's inflammable when it's a solid. That's why we use it as gunpowder. We also use sulfur in detergents because it is great at cleaning, I guess, and we found that out, and so we used it in our detergents. And also in some parts of the world, it is used for concrete. I don't think we use it here in Canada as concrete. Some people use sulfur as concrete. Sulfur is always found in fireworks as well because it is flammable, as well as matches. Sulfur. Sulfur is also found in batteries, stuff like that. That's about it, basically. And if you have any more things that you'd like to add to that, because I probably missed a lot, then you can tell me. You can comment down below and tell me, and I'll be like, oh my goodness, you are so smart. Okay, tell me down in the comments below. Stay tuned for some fun facts about sulfur. Okay, so I have brought my friend here. His name is. Tell me your name. My name is. Yeah, that's his name. So, I brought him down here because I was kind of getting a little bored in there doing, talking to an audience, which is a camera. So I was getting kind of bored, and I was like, why don't I get an audience to ask my did you know questions? And he's very willing, very happy to be here, aren't you? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So let's get started. Let's start with the first one. Okay, so Bobby, did you know that sulfur is what makes your urine smell really weird after you eat asparagus? No, I didn't. Well, now you do. Did you also know that sulfur is what makes rotten eggs smell really bad? Yes, yeah, I know that. Well, of course you knew, because that's like, everybody knows that. But yeah, that's true. Sulfur is also why onions make you cry, which is also very interesting if you didn't know that, Bob. But now you know that, so I'm glad you're interested in sulfur. Hey Bob, did you know that sulfur itself is actually non-toxic? No, I didn't. You might think of elements as being like toxic. No, just kidding. You might think of them being toxic and not being very nice to eat. But you can actually eat sulfur. However, please do not eat it because like you might die, and we don't want you to die. There have been reports of people having burning sensations inside of their bodies after eating sulfur. So please don't eat sulfur. Because I don't want to be responsible for you guys. Hey Bobby, did you know that sulfur is actually partly responsible for acid rain near factories? True, I didn't know that until I looked it up, and it was like, it's amazing. I'd say.